Thank you for coming to our session, everybody. Welcome to the Teen Book Festival virtual, and welcome to today's panel, Too Dark is Just Dark Enough, with Barry Lyga and Andrew Smith. I'm going to run through a few details before we get started this afternoon. First, everyone is going to remain muted during today's panel, and we're also asking that you keep your video turned off, turn off your camera so that Barry and Andrew are on display for all of us. But we do have the chat, so we do encourage you to ask questions. If you have a question for the authors, the chat is the place to post it. We have teen volunteers and adult volunteers monitoring the chat to get those questions to the author. So we'll do our best to ask all your questions. We have 45 minutes here together. And so we will do our best to get to everybody. Let's see. Today's panel is being recorded and it's going to be saved on the festival site that you're using today, which means that you can go back and watch it again, or you can go back and check out all the panels that are also at noon that you missed to be here today. So that's pretty exciting. Those should be up for about a month. And let's see, I think we'll go ahead and just get started with our intros. Today, we welcome Andrew Smith and Barry Lyga. Andrew Smith is the award-winning author of several young adult novels, including the critically acclaimed, award-winning, and awesomely crazy, I love this book, Grasshopper Jungle, and Winger. He's a native-born Californian who spent most of his formative years traveling the world and getting kicked off trains in France. He currently lives in Southern California with his two miniature donkeys, Ben and Casey Affleck. Barry Lyga has been called a YA rebel author by Kirkus Reviews, which Kirkus isn't nice, so that's a pretty good compliment from them.
Yeah.
He's published 17 novels in various genres in his 11-year career, including the New York Times best-selling I Hunt Killers. He lives and podcasts near New York City in his voice-controlled smart home, surrounded by his comic book collection, which is a lot smaller than it used to be, but is still very big. And personally, if you ask me, that sounds like a superhero villain with a voice-controlled smart home. Anyways, I am going to pass it on to Barry and Lyga, or Barry and Andrew. Thank you so much. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Oh my, Andrew, it has been forever since we've seen each other.
It has been a long time.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
No. I was going to say, you know, the topic here is too dark is not dark enough. And so I guess the first thing I would wonder is, dude, why are you such a downer? Who hurt you, man? Like, what happened?
That's I was, you know what, who hurt me? I always play music at the start of all my classes. And when kids are walking in, I call it my walk-in music. And I was playing Frank Ocean the other day, and a boy walked in and he goes, "Mr. Smith, who hurt you?" I do. I get asked that question a lot. I don't know. But I've always kind of had this. Attraction for dark subjects. I've always liked to watch scary movies and thrillers and things like that. And life gives us no shortage of inspiration when we go into that dark territory, right?
Yeah. No, that's true. I mean, when I wrote Bang about the little boy who plays with his father's gun and kills his baby sister, you know, people were like, "Oh my God, you know, how did you come up with that?" I'm like, look around. I mean, it's you know, every day. I saw a statistic that you're more likely to be shot and killed in the U.S. by a toddler than by a terrorist.
Yeah.
And you know, and yet we're terrified of terrorists, but nobody's afraid of toddlers. They're the ones you got to be looking out for, man. They're packing heat and they can't aim. So yeah, it's funny because, like you, there's. I think I've always had this sort of attraction to these dark topics, but I think you'll agree with me on this. I think the thing that people forget a lot is it's not just about the darkness. There is an entertainment there. You know, I mean, as a species, we've been telling dark, scary stories since we first figured out how to ward off the dark with fire, you know? And yes, there was a sense of, this is to protect you. We tell you the story about the saber-toothed tiger so you won't get eaten too. But I think there's an entertainment value to it. I mean, people forget, like, it's fun because it's not actually happening to you. You get to experience it viscerally without actually having your hand chopped off or watching somebody die or falling into a dark pit or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, don't you think that part of the beauty of going into a dark territory is that you can establish these connections between something that's completely mundane and then something that's also shockingly bizarre, and for some reason those things come together. Like for example, I love to read studies about relationships between certain things. I'm fascinated by economics, and I read as much as I can about economics studies about relationships. And I read this study that was actually conducted one time that showed that there's a correlation between the amount of Swiss cheese that Americans eat and the number of adults who strangle themselves in their bed sheets. I mean, just like, I mean, how perfect is that? I mean, that's
right,
just,
yeah.
You know, life is like that.
You couldn't invent that.
No,
you know, it's the kind of thing that comes up from the ferment of real life, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
So go ahead. You want to strangle yourself in your sheets? Go ahead and eat that Swiss cheese sandwich.
Eat that Swiss cheese, man. It's gonna happen. See, I knew there was a reason I didn't like Swiss cheese, and now I know. It's because I'm terrified of dying in my bed, strangled by my bed sheets.
Yeah,
I have perfect sense.
I have a throwback for you though. So and it's kind of funny because, you know, during the pandemic, it was like, you know, I was homebound, just stuck to this computer screen, you know, for the last 14 months. And of course, my computer just died and I had to get a new computer, which meant that, you know, when you get a new computer, you have to clean your desk, right? To make room for the new computer. It doesn't include cleaning my bookshelf. But so I was cleaning my desk from the corpse of my old computer, and I found this.
No!
This is from the first time that I met you, Barry, who actually has an action figure for his book, Goth Girl Rising. Look at that. Still, it's been, you know what? And it's been on eBay for 12 years and I can't sell it. I'm kidding. I love this.
It's mint in package. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So we do have a question in the chat for you guys.
Okay.
Are your characters based on anyone or an event in particular, like perhaps Swiss cheese and someone being strangled by their bed sheet?
I feel like everything is based on Swiss cheese now. I feel like we've sort of figured out the fundamental relationship of all the forces that physicists have been trying to define for decades. It's all about Swiss cheese. You know, I think Andrew would agree with this. Like, everything that you write has a piece of you in it, no matter how distinct or different from you it seems to be. And I think the trick is, you know, it's not necessarily that something's based on a person that you know or an event that actually happened, so much as you take those things and you dice them and then you mix and match them and reassemble them into new pieces. So, you know, you take, you know, your friend's experience when they were a kid and you graft that to this thing you overheard in a coffee shop, and then onto that you staple this weird article you read about Swiss cheese, and you go, oh yeah, that kind of works. I can make that work as a story. When I wrote The Secret Sea, I had read this strange thing about a disease that only affects identical twins in the womb. It's called twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. Like, who even knows about that? I somehow stumbled upon it and I read it and it stuck in my head. And then I read something weird about quantum physics. And then I read about this weird fact about 9/11 that most people don't know. And somehow those three things combined into a story for me. You know, which again, like that's just bizarre. Like it's just a weird thing where I think what we do is we see these connections where most people don't. And that's where the stories come from.
Absolutely. I mean, if I go way back, probably one of the books that, and not to be overly dark, but I guess that's what the topic is here. But if I go way back to when I wrote this book, The Marbury Lens, and why I wrote it, it's an incredibly dark book. It was the subject of basically a hit piece by the by the Wall Street Journal, in this article that claimed that young adult fiction was too dark for readers, that it was damaging the souls of young people. But the book itself was based on something that actually happened to me, a horrible thing that happened to me when I was a kid. And it was something that I internalized for a long time. And I experienced survivor guilt. And I wanted to write about that, but it wasn't the right time in my life to ever write about that experience until I actually started writing this book. And really one of the reasons that I wrote the book was that I actually kind of wanted my publisher to fire me. I wanted them to say, you can't write something like this for teenagers, because I don't know, I think I was really, I was kind of dissatisfied with what I was doing and where I was in my life. I don't think that I didn't actually want to be a writer. I wanted to just write. And so this book kind of was channeled all of those feelings, survivor guilt, having gone through a terrible experience when I was a teenager, and then trying to, put that together in some bizarre kind of alternate universe world.
Yeah. I always tell people, horrible things happen. Like we're not inventing any of this. Like everything that we write, has, we don't just come up with it. It all happened. And, to the argument of, you can't write about this in a book for teenagers. Show me how not writing about it will protect them. Nobody's ever been able to explain that to me. If I thought, I wrote Boy Toy about a kid who is molested by his teacher. If I thought that not writing Boy Toy would make it so that no kid would be molested by their teacher again, I wouldn't have written it. But that's not how the world works.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how art works. So I wrote it. You wrote Marbury Lens, and those books are out there, and they're going to disturb some people and they're going to help some people, and that's what art is.
We do have a question from Lee. Yep. In the darkness, do your books always have to have hope? Isn't that why we tell dark stories?
I have a problem with the word always. Because I don't know if books have to have hope, but I think that, I think that a lot of it's up to the reader. Joseph Conrad said, you only write half of the book, the other half is written by the reader. And so there are going to be people who have, kind of a tendency towards optimism and seeing things in a brighter light than others do. So I don't honestly know if my books actually have hope, but I think they do. For some people, I don't know if I actually intend to always include that as an ingredient, but some kind of sense of finality or an ending has to be there, I think. What do you think, Barry?
Yeah, I think that in general we expect that, and I think that that's what makes stories that don't end on that hopeful, optimistic note even more powerful. I can remember as a kid reading a Stephen King book, and I can't remember which one now, but I was staying up late to read it because I was terrified and I couldn't go to sleep. And I'm like, I have to finish it because I know at the end of the book everything will be okay. And it turned out it was one of those Stephen King books where everything isn't okay at the end. So I kind of screwed myself over in that regard. But I think, I think that, the thing about life is none of us get out of it alive, right? And we don't know what comes after. And so I think that it is comforting to write something dark that has hope at the end. But I also think that that's sort of a simplistic not simplistic. It's a dichotomy that isn't necessarily real. I don't think that it's you either have hope or you have no hope. I think there are gradations there. And I think there are ways to tell a story that is dark and end it in a way that leaves the reader going, okay, yeah, that felt really dark, but maybe X, Y, or Z. And so I don't think that it has to be all these horrible things happened and at the end, but everything's going to be okay. It can be all these horrible things happened and we survived it. I mean, that right there is optimism and hope. You know, the fact that we survived, you talked about what you survived. The fact that we can go through these things and survive them is in itself just an act of audacious hope.
Yes, very well said. Andrew, we have a question specifically for you. What drove you to write Grasshopper Jungle?
Oh, I'll take this one.
Well, you know, there were a whole lot of things that were inspirations in Grasshopper Jungle. Not the least of which was that I was going through this kind of like this change part in my life where, again, I wasn't really sure if I wanted to continue being a writer. There's a difference between being a writer and writing. I would never not write, but sometimes I don't really like being a writer. I don't like that to be like the defining thing. So I was having a crisis in those regards. My son left home to go away to college. That was my first, and that was kind of hard. And so I just kind of withdrew into myself, and I thought, I'm going to write something for myself that will give me pleasure without having any intention whatsoever of letting anybody else see it or read it. I was not going to submit this for publication. And my son asked if he could read it when he was away at college, and I let him read it, and he really liked it a lot and kind of made me feel better about myself and what I was doing, not being. And so I submitted it. And so I guess it came from a really weird psychological place. And it is a very dark book, but it also, this one does end, unlike the Marbury Lens that just kind of ends and you're going, well, is this good or bad? But Grasshopper Jungle has an ending that I think that conveys a great deal of hope. It was fun to write.
It was fun to read, I will say. We have another question. How do you protect yourselves from the darkness when you immerse yourself in writing these dark stories?
Wow. Oh boy. You know, I never used to worry about that. I remember when I was writing I Hunt Killers, all my friends joked that I'd been born without a soul because it didn't bother me. I was getting into the heads of serial killers and writing about them and slept just fine. And then I wrote Bang about the baby that was killed. And for some reason, I decided to write this book literally 4 months after my first child was born. And I'm writing this book and it just wrecked me. I mean, I'm writing about this dead baby and my daughter's in a bassinet next to me. And it was the first time in 20 books and however many years as a writer that I wrote something that just really, really disturbed me. And I mean, I remember there were certain sections of the book that I couldn't write while I was in the house with her. I had my mother-in-law come and watch her, and I went around the corner to a coffee shop to write those bits. I just didn't want that psychic energy in the house while she was there. So I mean, but I didn't protect myself. I just did it. So sometimes the only way out is through. I think sometimes, what if I had just not written it? What if I just stopped writing it? I don't know. But I felt compelled to write it. It was a story I felt compelled to tell. I think, I think having a life is the best protection. The panel I was on just before this one, I mentioned Stephen King's dictum that life is not a support system for art. Art is a support system for life. And you have to remember that the most important thing is not the page in front of you. The most important thing is the world around you. And I think that inoculates you to a degree against what you're creating on the page.
I think that fits pretty well with how I would respond to that question. Is that I don't so much I'm not so much concerned about protecting myself when I'm writing something that's dark. I'm concerned about protecting the book itself from getting too far out there. And not coincidentally enough, but I do have a lot of friends who've struggled with pandemic brain and creativity in the last 14 months. And in the last 14 months, starting right around the beginning of the pandemic, I started writing this novel that I'm really literally on the last pages of right now. And it's pretty darn dark. And I found myself having to kind of rein in the narrative of the story and just make it like not as a full on boil as a slow simmer, because it's kind of it's really easy to go there and let that kind of it's like pouring too much salt in something that you're cooking. You got to just be careful.
Someone has asked, is your sense of humor affected by the style of book you write?
Oh, I have a very dark sense of humor. So I don't know if my sense of humor is affected by my books or if my sense of humor affects my books. Because I see a difference in, there are people who would say, it's good therapy to go back and actually read one of your books from maybe 10 years ago or so, to think about who you were then and compare that person to now. That's a pretty dark idea for me. A pretty dark time travel, psychological mind weirdness thing to go through. But I have a dark sense of humor. I like dark jokes. And I think that's fed through my books.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, my sense of humor has always been a little morbid. I tend to find things amusing or funny that other people would find sketchy, shall we say? Which which doesn't mean, and I hope nobody ever interprets it this way, that I don't care. Like if I can laugh about something that's a little dark, it doesn't mean that I think it's okay that dark thing happened. It's just, I don't know, it's just, it just tickles your funny bone. It's like people who laugh at a funeral, or people who laugh at bad news. That certainly happened to me, where somebody tells me something awful that happened to them, and I just can't, I'm like holding in I'm like, don't laugh, don't. It's not that I think it's okay or good that it happened to them. I guess it's just sort of tapping into this sense of the effed up irony of the universe, like visiting this weirdness upon that person. And you have that reaction and you're kind of like, oh my God, really? But then hopefully, you're still there for that person and supportive and all that. But it's just, oh yeah, that's kind of funny. Like in a weird way, that's funny.
How has enduring this pandemic affected your what you're working on? Has it?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I was wrapping up a bunch of stuff right when the pandemic hit. I was like doing revisions and all that. So the first 6 months of the pandemic was all cleanup, like I wasn't really doing anything new. And also, I mean, you talked about your son going off to college. My kids are much younger. And so I was stuck in the house with 2 small children who desperately needed entertainment and distraction. So I was not terribly productive. That was very difficult. And then once those 6 months came up and like, the preschools opened again and things like that, and I started to have a little more time, I've really wrestled with, what do I want to do next? I have like 3 different projects in various stages. And I wrestle with it because I don't want to say it's a question of like, what kind of art does the world need? Because we both know publishing takes so long. By the time these books come out, we'll be on to the next pandemic. So, there's no point trying to second guess that. But it's more a question of what do I need right now? Do I want to write another YA? Do I want to write a fantasy novel? Do I want to write a thriller? And I don't know. And I'm having a lot of trouble with that. So, I mean, you've been writing something the whole pandemic, right?
Yes, and I had a book come out right at the worst part of the pandemic.
Oh yeah. Oh, so yeah, so did I.
Yeah, that feels like trying to grow flowers during a nuclear winter or something.
Yeah.
It was the most frustrating, and because you
want to talk about dark. Try being a debut author during a pandemic.
Oh,
like I feel sorry for them, man. Oh my God.
And they have no idea what life was really like. It's like, it's like landing on a different planet. And how will this evolve afterwards? Because the things we used to do were so different. And I guess it's going to affect every aspect of life. But boy, having a book come out during that terrible, terrible time, and because of the way publishing works, you can't control it, you can't predict the future or anything. But it was a real depressing thing, and yeah, those poor debut novelists. I just hope everything gets immeasurably better for them.
You and I are two old men who've done this a bunch of times, so we can sort of sit back philosophically and say, okay, like when the book of mine that came out at the height of the pandemic, I was like, I'm not even going to pay attention.
Yeah.
Like, if people find it, great, but God knows there's many more things to worry about right now. So we can take that attitude, but man, I feel bad for these babies, who have their first books coming out, and it's not even about. I mean, I think about the things, last summer and fall rather, I had like 10 different various festivals and events and stuff I was going to go to, and all that got canceled. I'm not even thinking about that stuff that they're missing out on, the in-person stuff, although that stuff's wonderful, as you know. I'm just thinking about the fact that everybody's attention is so fragmented and so fractured, and it's so difficult. I find it difficult to really sink into a book right now. It's rough. And you know what? That's the answer to anybody who says our books are too dark. Look around.
Totally.
We have a question from Isabel. If you had to write a story in any other genre, what genre would you choose?
I only write stories that I have to write, and I don't and it's not the genre that tells me. I mean, but if I wrote outside of any of the genre that I write in, rom-com, I guess.
I was about to say rom-com. I want to see an Andrew Smith rom-com.
I could totally do it. There might be cannibalism. There might be a little cannibalism in it, but hey.
But that's okay. That's okay. As long as they get together at the end, it doesn't matter.
They'll work through, right? Of course, you can work through it, even cannibalism.
Yeah. I would kill to see that. I've written in so many different genres. I've been all over the place. I've done the coming of age. I've done the literary, the thriller, the mystery, the superhero, the science fiction. But that's how I read as a kid. I read all over the place. My tastes were extremely Catholic. And so I think that there's this big sprawling epic fantasy novel that I've been working on off and on for about 3 or 4 years now. I would love to finish that. I love that kind of story, and I would love to tell, the book I'm talking about. It's the one that has a map when you open it, like that. I want a book with a map. Okay. So I'd love to do that. And then it's funny, the other day I was saying to somebody, I want to write a time travel book. And he looked at me and he said, dude, you've written like 3 time travel books. And I was like, oh yeah, I have. And I'm like, but I want to write a specific kind of time travel book that I haven't done yet. So I would really like to do that. and maybe I'll get around to that. The book that I've got coming out in September, I kept trying to turn it into a time travel book, which is weird because it's like it's like an intergenerational like murder mystery thriller thing. So there's no sci-fi trappings to it at all. And I kept trying to make it a time travel book. And I think that's what made me say, yeah, I need to write a time travel book.
Our next question kind of goes back to what you were talking about a little bit earlier. This person said they've seen trends of pandemic reading where people wanted to read dark topics and people who needed safer escapism. Do you think that this has had an impact on your readership this year?
Well, I think everybody's habits have changed as a result of the pandemic. Creators and consumers of art have gone in different directions. So I think it's probably definitely impacted our readership. Good thing we have so many novels that readers can find different things that they like. I know that a lot of my friends also have expressed, having difficulty just focusing on reading at all. And these are people that normally read a lot. And I've had a different experience that during the pandemic, I've just been a voracious consumer of reading, and I've read all kinds of things during the pandemic, and it's really been a lifesaver to me. So yeah, I hope that reading has helped because of the broad range of different things that authors like Barry and myself have. Hopefully we've been able to make connections with people in new ways.
I mean, I think, people have different responses to trauma and to tragedy. Some people want to find something even darker to wallow in so they can say, see, at least that didn't happen. And other people want to find something lighter so they can say, oh, this is a better world that I'd rather imagine. I truly think that I know that living in the internet age, we are expecting answers to come to us as quickly as an Amazon Prime delivery. But the fact of the matter is that I think it's going to be a decade or more before we truly understand the impact of the pandemic. There are some things you can only understand when you look at them in the rearview mirror. And I think this is one of them. And we live in a world of hot takes. We live in a world of tweets. And I think everybody thinks they can explain it and understand it right now. I think 10 years from now, we're going to look back at those people and laugh, because everybody's comparing it to the 1918 flu and the Roaring '20s that came after, and they're looking for these patterns and everything. You can't compare two eras of history. The technology is different. The people are different. The mix in the country is different. Our understanding of culture is different. Everything's different. So I think it's going to be a while. So all I can do is write what I hope are good books and put them out there, and people either respond or they don't. And I have no control after it's put down in paper and put on a bookshelf somewhere, which is the toughest thing I think for a writer to come to grips with, is that you completely lose control. So I don't know. I don't know what people are going to be looking for. Because I don't think people know yet what they're going to be looking for.
I read in a book that just recently came out by Helen Oyeyemi called Pieces. And I'm paraphrasing this, but there was a beautiful line in it in which she said something like, when I tell you things are going to get better, you have to believe me unless you're holding out for some different answer. Mm-hmm. And I just thought that was a perfect kind of line about maybe just maintaining some kind of degree of hope or optimism throughout even the dark journey that takes place in her book, and also the dark journey that we were all on as a global population.
Yeah.
Are there any works in progress that you can talk about?
Well, yeah, I mean, like, I am writing a novel. Like I said, I'm literally on the last pages, unless I surprise myself, and this is going to be a lot longer than I thought it would, but it seems like it's at the ending right now. And I find myself in a lot of ways, I don't know if this ever has happened to you, Barry, but I find myself kind of not wanting to finish it, because finishing it means then I have to do something else, and I also have to transport myself out of this world. I kind of have to exile myself from that world and let it go.
Yeah.
And so but I'm happy with what I'm writing. I don't know if I know, like Grasshopper Jungle, I don't know if I will ever let anybody see it. I'll wait until well after I'm finished with it. But I never, going back to what I said earlier, I never won't do writing. But sometimes I don't really like being a writer. If that makes sense to you, a different kind of look at the identity of a writer versus what we do to make a living.
No, that makes perfect sense to me, because it's talking about taking your passion and the thing that you love and monetizing it.
Mhm.
Which, there's the old saying, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. But the flip side of that is do what you love and it becomes work, to a degree. And yeah, that can be difficult. And that's why, I've got, works in progress. I've got a couple things that I'm noodling around with right now. And I think that where I am getting hung up is on, okay, do I want to write something that I think will sell, or do I just want to write something? And I don't know where I am with that right now. Do I want to write this book over here that's going to be a lot of fun, but who knows if anybody will ever buy it? Or do I want to write this one that is also fun, but has a better chance of selling? And I don't know where I come down on that, because they both seem interesting to me. And again, after being stuck inside for a year with two small children, it's like, your brain reconfigures itself, and you're not, you question a lot. But, even in the times where I take little breaks from writing, which I do, I'm always thinking about it, even if I'm not actually, doing that. I'm always thinking about it. So there will be more, but just nothing I can talk about right now, because I'm just not sure where it's gonna come from.
I last week I got a really long email from a reader who's been a fan since they were maybe 12 years old, and now they're about to graduate from university, and really, really talented writer. And they were expressing to me how, how stuck they are in their writing right now. And it's because, and the way they even formatted their email looked like a very well crafted essay that you would turn into a college professor. And I told them, there's a difference between the have to writing and the want to writing. Yep. And so I said, choose your professors well, because the better professors are going to make you want to do their have to assignments.
Yeah.
But I struggle with that too, with sometimes feeling myself being more distant from my writing, which I don't like. I like my writing and myself to be like immediately in the same space. And I felt like, that I'd been getting to the point where this had become such a job that I'd become more and more distant from my writing, and I didn't like that. And that's what I was trying to explain to this young reader. But I have complete confidence in them. It was a beautifully written email, and I hope they continue to be a reader of mine and develop their writing abilities, as they obviously have.
We have about 5 minutes left. We do have another question here. It says, dark question. Do you think anyone has taken your books the wrong way?
Yes. Every time someone sends me a tattoo of something out of one of my books, I'm going, man, you've gone a little too far. But right on.
That's what I had a woman email me just the other day. It's funny you mentioned tattoo. And she was like, hey, I'm turning 18 and I can finally get a tattoo. And I want to get a tattoo from your I Hunt Killers series. And what do you think I should get? Do you have suggestions? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's a lot of pressure to put on me. Like you're asking me long distance without knowing you to deface your flesh permanently. Like, what? I mean, like, and I'm not even into tattoos at all. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. So
that is
yeah,
heavy.
That's heavy. You know, I had somebody once, and this was an adult, tell me that that she thought that everybody was wrong about Boy Toy, that it was not a novel about abuse, it was a romance.
Ooh.
And I thought, well, you didn't get it. And then I thought about it, I'm like, no, you know, like to a degree, she was right, because for the adult character, it was a romance. It was a romance. It was a seduction. It was a beautiful story of you know, of love. And so I'm like, yeah, like you're right to a degree. But I think what the question is really getting at is like, do we worry that somebody will read something we wrote and then go do something unsafe? I will say with my very first book, there was a line where the characters are talking, and there's a line where the one character has tried to commit suicide before, and Fanboy is mocking her and saying, you didn't really try, because if you'd really wanted to die, you would have done this instead of this. And my editor at the last minute, like they had already printed the galleys, said, like, do you really want that in there? Like explicit instructions on how to commit suicide? And I thought about it, I thought this was like the first like heady philosophical question in my writing career. And I said, all right, let's change it a little bit. And I think what I changed to is actually worse, because what he ends up saying to her is, you're just a wannabe, try harder next time, which I think is even worse than sort of giving this dry recitation of instructions. But so, yeah, I mean, I guess to a degree, you know, in that regard, I was worried about it. I certainly hope that doesn't happen, but you know, you can read a cookbook and come away from it and decide, you were talking about cannibalism before, you can decide, I'm gonna saute mom, you know, like, so you know, anything can inspire you to darkness and evil. We live in a very, very fertile world in that regard.
But I think the most obvious way that people have taken my books in the wrong way are, like, for example, I got an email from a teenage boy whose mom found this book in his backpack and then took all of his books away from him and punished him. Taking books the wrong way, this book got banned in a school district in Oregon. That's the worst example of taking a book in the wrong way that I can think of.
It doesn't look like there's any more questions, and we're actually right at 12:45. So
see, you get two professionals together like this, we stick the landing.
Even really without spiels.
Even without spiels, exactly.
So thank you to everyone who has tuned in today. Thank you to Andrew and to Barry for entertaining us for 45 minutes with the darkness. And everybody, like I said, this is being recorded. So if you want to watch it again, it will be here on the site. Or if you want to watch the others, they will also be here. So go on and have fun at TBF, and we'll see you all at the next festival.
Thank you. Bye. Barry, great seeing you. I can't wait.
Hey, Andrew, good to see you, man. I wish it had been in person, but we'll get there.
Take care.
All right.